Hi, this is Regina Davis, Director of Communications at NARUC, and we're joined today at our Summer 2020 Policy Summit by Vicki Trees of Landis+Gyr. Landis+Gyr is one of NARUC's top sponsors, and Vicki, you are Vice President of Policy and Industry Relations, correct?
That is correct.
And tell us, how long have you been with Landis+Gyr?
I have worked with Landis+Gyr for nearly 20 years. So got my start in product management, worked through marketing and industry, and now really am a voice in the marketplace for both Landis+Gyr and the industry as a whole.
So tell us more about Landis+Gyr. Now, of course, you've been a big sponsor of NARUC meetings for many years, and we really do appreciate the support that we've always gotten from Landis+Gyr. But for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you guys do.
Absolutely. At the core, Landis+Gyr is really committed to the delivery of safe, reliable, and affordable power. And we do that through our charter to help manage energy better. And you may say, well, that's a broad charter, so I'll narrow it down a little closer. We really are focused on working with distribution utilities, and we help them by deploying technologies and service that allow them to distribute energy more efficiently. So things such as advanced metering infrastructure, distribution automation, some service, data analytics. So we're really focused on how do we help the distribution utility distribute most efficiently. But then also we have a portion of our business that's focused on enabling the distribution utility to service their end use consumer more effectively. And as we chat, we'll really talk about what is it that's happening at the consumer side that the distribution utility needs to work with.
Oh, that's great. I'd really like to learn more about that. So, of course, you know that NARUC attracts a broad range of regulators, industry, stakeholders, and so forth. So for you all, what do you get out of participating in and supporting NARUC meetings?
Yeah, great question. For us, when we go to NARUC, there's really a couple different angles that we're trying to play. First and foremost, we'd like to have conversations with the regulators as well as the staff from an education perspective, understand what challenges they're working on in their particular markets, and then perhaps bringing some of our expertise to the table to be able to help them solve those challenges. So that's really working with the regulators. We also spend a fair amount of time with the utility regulatory staff and working with them, and how is it that they approach their regulators in terms of, in particular, the technology and innovation aspects. So we feel like there's the policy angle for us to talk specifically to regulators and staff, but then also to work alongside our utilities. And probably the third piece of the puzzle when we're at NARUC is really bringing together the community that's working on these issues, whether it be regulators, other solution providers, or the utility themselves. As you know, a lot of the challenges we tackle are really complicated, and it will take the entire community to make that into a success. So for us, just some of those side conversations and brainstorming, thinking about things a little bit differently are important.
Well, for us, I mean, it's really good to get to hear that response from you, because, you know, our goal at NARUC, part of our mandate, of course, is the advocacy part, but as important, if not more important, is also the education piece and being able to facilitate those great conversations among people who attend the meeting, and also to get just the education, the information about the innovation that's occurring out there in the marketplace. So that's really interesting to hear. So as we dive into this, what are some of the key priorities? Give me maybe 3 or 4 priorities that regulators, utilities, and also solution providers such as Landis+Gyr are really focusing their attention to right now.
Right. From a perspective of kind of key topic areas, I think about it in terms of this big bucket of clean energy and what that means to our space. So I'll come back and talk on that. So we talk about clean energy. I think the center to all of this is the end use consumer and the role that they play and the benefits that they receive. And then also on the reliability. I think in light of the situation we're in right now with lots of work from home, the reliability of what I call the essential service of making sure we have the electricity to do all those other things has been forefront. And then just because of where we're at today, I think the fourth area we really think about is what are the impacts of this whole pandemic and what it means for our industry, the way we do business. So if we go back to the beginning and we talk about clean, a lot of regulators, whether they be the regulatory environment or maybe a governor through a legislative act, there's a lot of initiatives across the country around clean initiatives and what that means. And so you see utilities moving to cleaner energy sources. Right. You see more players coming to the table. So in addition to the utility, there are other solution providers or other service providers that are part of that. And then oftentimes we see also the end use consumer is becoming more involved in the cleaning of our energy sources. And whether it be a commercial and industrial customer who's looking to deploy some distributed resources directly, or the end use residential customer. So the cleaning of our energy sources, I think, is a big topic of how do we go about doing that in an effective manner. It brings other people to the table than historically have played.
Right.
So there's that portion, I think, that's really interesting for us as a solution provider to play in, but also the policy and the business model pieces that come along with that. I think one of the things we talk about is the fact that by virtue of how clean energy works, a lot of it is more distributed. Mm-hmm. And so we have a distribution system that traditionally had central generation, and the utility had visibility and control over a lot of what was happening in the space. And now, all of a sudden, generation is distributed throughout their system. They need to understand what's going on in each of those different areas and be able to adapt and adjust to it. So the types of technologies that are in our portfolio are really the types of things that give them that visibility all the way to the grid edge and the ability to interact. We see it even just growing more and more as electric vehicles are deployed more and more. So just the change in dynamic of how energy is distributed is very interesting. So that's on that clean category.
It's a very broad changing landscape. It seems to change constantly.
Very much so. The other area I think that's really unique is where the consumer fits in. So one of the things that we find in working with the groups that come together at NARUC is there's a keen focus on what does it mean for the consumer, what's in it for the consumer, what are the economic impacts. So one of the things we like to bring forward is the fact of how is it that these technologies can help the average consumer have the ability to manage their energy in a fashion that makes sense for them. And what I mean by that is when I think back into over the 20 years that I've worked in this industry, we used to think about having technology that we would deploy, and a common example was like, we'll put an in-home display in someone's home and they'll be able to see what their energy usage is.
Right.
And the reality is that was interesting for them, and they had it on their kitchen counter for the first 2 months, and then it went into a drawer. And the reason that did that is because technology changed, and most consumers are now interested in getting their information via their smartphone or an app, and they don't really want to watch it all the time. They really want to watch just the exceptions or tell me something that I can react to. Mm-hmm. So when I think, especially over the last 5 to 7 years, how much that has changed for the consumer, one of the challenges I think we have is how do we ensure that the policies and regulations that we're working on keep up with that kind of pace of change that's happening in the consumer world that we can then apply. So that's kind of an aspect I think we think about. And I think the other comes down to how do we make it affordable and equitable across the industry? Because if someone is really interested in energy management and has the means to do it, they'll find a way to acquire the necessary technology on their own. And that leaves a portion of the population with not having access to that. So how do we more easily spread the benefits across the utility total population or their entire consumer base so that they can see what their usage is, that they have flexibility. We talk about a lot of it, flexible billing options, so that they understand not just after they've consumed energy, how much their bill is, but that they can actually see as they're going along how much it's costing, and more important, how can they adjust their consumption to better manage for themselves?
Right. And of course, I know that these issues are very important to our members, the consumer piece, and making sure that as many consumers as possible have access to these technologies and know how to apply them.
Absolutely. And I think one of the unique things that we can bring to the table when we come together at NARUC, and Landis+Gyr serves customers all over the globe, and our experience even across North America, by bringing those individual state experiences to the table and understanding what's working for some utilities and their customer bases into a forum that others can learn from, because it takes a little bit of time to learn those lessons. So anything we can do to share, especially on the consumer side, has been really helpful. Setting expectations, both with the policymakers, the utilities, and the solution providers.
That's good to know.
Yeah. The other thing I touched on was reliability. And I think with the pandemic and so many more people working from home, and we think about healthcare and how critical it was or is to what's going on. And when you pause and you think about that fact that without even if we just limit it to electricity alone, and we talk about electricity, if I didn't have electricity at my home, all of a sudden, not only am I inconvenienced, but I'm not able to do the work that I need to do for my profession. And if I'm a healthcare provider, if I have a glitch in the electric distribution system, I'm not able to serve my patients in the way that I normally would choose to serve from a medical perspective. So I think that reliability is key. And what's really tugging on that, we talk about the climate change and changes in weather patterns and some of the severity of storms. That's an aspect of this natural disasters we need to work through. But then also those same distributed resources are taxing the grid in a different way. Right. And the fact that we need to be able to adjust to that in order to deliver that reliability is really important. So we have a great track record as an industry of being reliable, but I think the ratcheting up of expectations with distributed workforces is really real.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I think that's interesting to think about in this particular time is what impact has the pandemic had on our industry. And in talking with a lot of the utilities, I think the first 6 weeks were spent realizing, can we make this work with remote staff and remote operation? And then the next 6 weeks were kind of spent in awe of the fact that they had successfully transitioned to this environment. And I've heard a lot of comments about, wow, we're more efficient. We've been able to do things we never thought possible. When we talked about having a remote workforce, there was always hesitancy, and now we realize they're doing a great job. They've been effective and efficient. How is it that we build upon this and utilize this? A particular area, some of the utilities, they talked about their control room, where historically, everything had to be done in person in the control room because of whether it be security requirements or infrastructure.
Right.
And some of those things have been able to be dispersed. And so surprising to them, as well as beneficial as they think about their future. Like how else can we think about this remote application, this application of technology that might allow us to do things without sending our staff out to a customer residence? Who knew that social distancing would cause us to think a little bit differently about how we serve the customer?
That's right.
So it's definitely an interesting time within our space, and I think a time with a lot of opportunity for us to think differently, react differently, and hopefully react a little more quickly.
Right. It's a period where people are having to pivot and try to adapt as much as they can. So
Absolutely.
it's great. Yeah, so it's great to know that Landis+Gyr is a big part of those solutions that folks are looking for. And I have one last question for you. So
Okay.
if there were any ask that you could make of regulators or folks who are in the regulatory space, what would it be?
One of the key asks that I think about when I'm thinking of having conversations with regulators is, let's really focus on the outcomes that we're looking to achieve. Being a technology company, a lot of what we focus on changes very rapidly. So what looked good from an implementation or technology perspective 3 years ago has really shifted and doesn't necessarily apply. So if we can focus on those outcomes that we're after and not necessarily the how we're going to get them done, I think that
Right.
allows for us to kind of foster that innovation. And I think the other thing that comes to mind for me is, what can we do to help um, allow utilities to move forward more quickly with some of their projects? And we've talked about different ideas of how do you get from a demonstration project to a full rollout without having to go all the way back to square one for approval. So
Right.
can we be thinking about maybe building in some milestones that say, great, start a demonstration project, and if you've proved it out, we're really giving you approval to move forward, so there isn't this piece to come back. So again, I think the two big areas, let's focus on the outcomes we're after, and let's focus on ways that we can expedite the process a little more quickly.
Wow, that's great. Very good ideas, good food for thought for our regulators and the other folks who are in this space. And again, I'd like to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to chat with us today. And I hope that you'll be participating in our Summer Policy Summit and that you will enjoy the sessions. And we look forward to touching base with you again in the near future.
Thank you, I appreciate the time.